McDonald.
The experience of sexual violence or abuse is a crime like no other. It brings with it the physical trauma, fear and shock associated with any violent assault, but it brings much more. It's an insidious crime, a secret crime, unspoken and unacknowledged in many cases, denied and disbelieved in many cases. It is, maybe uniquely, a crime for which many victims are left feeling responsible, guilty even, for their own suffering. And the profound sense of stigma, of silence and of isolation associated with the crime of abuse has scarred the lives of countless victims across Ireland, across generations, across class and creed. It takes courage to disclose, to make a complaint, to speak out. I want to acknowledge every person who has taken those decisions and those that have stepped into the public light to tell their story. Maria Cahill took that brave decision. I also want to acknowledge how essential anonymity is for many victims. It affords them the privacy and protection in which to pursue justice, to cope, to heal, and to come to terms with their ordeal. The alleged rapist at the centre of this controversy and debate is alleged to have committed offences against 2 other people in addition to Maria. Their legal representative has made clear that the sensationalist commentary over the last number of weeks has caused them distress. I think we should be mindful of their rights and of their feelings. While much of the public debate and commentary on sexual violence and child abuse has centred on people's experiences in various institutions, it is true to say that the place where women and children are most vulnerable to abuse is in their home and among their family circle. Abuse is most often carried out by perpetrators who are close to and trusted by the victim. Figures published this morning by the Rape Crisis Network reflect that 91% of perpetrators are known to their victims. And I think Maria Cahill's case follows a tragic, disturbing pattern for teenage victims. The crime was rape, the alleged perpetrator a family member, known and trusted, and the assaults took place in the perpetrator's home. She first disclosed to a family member, someone within her circle of trust. That person was the late Siobhan O'Hanlon, her cousin. Many families didn't know in the past, and indeed still don't know, how to respond to the earthquake in their lives that a disclosure of abuse is. I think it's probably the most traumatic and potentially the most divisive revelation that any family can experience. Indeed, I have known cases where people have gone to their graves still not having been believed by their family members. And that is why, Las Corla, it is so essential that the state and its institutions have the confidence and trust of victims and their families. That confidence and trust is the first requirement for people to come forward and make complaints. It is the most basic prerequisite to justice. That trust and confidence didn't exist in the Northern State. We've recognised that. People did not trust, could not trust the RUC. The political chaos of conflict left many victims in an ongoing, agonising silence, afraid of their abuser, afraid of the war, afraid of armed groups, afraid of the police, afraid of Special Branch in the British Army, afraid for their families, afraid for their lives. Many, many victims of sexual violence and rape in the course of the conflict never told anyone, never reported anywhere. Others reported to social services or the RUC, and in some of these cases at least they were mishandled or cynically exploited in the game of one-upmanship in the course of a very vicious conflict. Other victims came forward to other groups, including the IRA. The IRA should never have been involved in dealing with accusations of sexual violence or abuse, but they were. Rough justice or summary justice for alleged perpetrators meant no justice for the victims. That's the reality. The IRA was never and could never be a substitute for the due process that is at the core of upholding victims' rights and punishing those found guilty of such a heinous crime. Maria Cahill says that she was subjected to a coercive investigation by the IRA. That version of events is vigorously contested by the women and men who stand accused of acting as interrogators. And for the record, 2 of those so accused are women. The Taoiseach earlier conjured up the image of the disappeared, and Deputy Smith repeated this in his words of condemnation of those who he asserts carried out this kangaroo court. He went on, for reasons best known to himself, to belittle Breach Wright in particular and to sneer at her support of work with abused women in West Belfast. Is the Taoiseach aware that Breach is the sister of one of those disappeared? Was he being gratuitously cruel in making his remarks? I suppose he doesn't care, because in this case, it seems anything goes. Over the last number of weeks, my words of condemnation for those in the Roman Catholic Church who covered up sexual abuse have been echoed and re-echoed. I wish to repeat those words again. Anyone associated with the abuse of a child or the cover-up of abuse must face the full rigours of the law. That is the case irrespective of who the perpetrator may be. There are no exceptions to this rule. Nobody is exempt. Nobody within any group, any organisation, and let me say explicitly, that includes Republicans and former members of the IRA. 1 in 4 experience abuse. It's not that far away from any of us or from our families. It's undoubtedly the case, a statistical certainty, that abusers are found in all walks of life, and the IRA was no exception. Some members have today read accounts into the record of this House, very harrowing stories of victims of abuse by Republicans. Can I say to those victims that they were not abused in our name? Can I assure those victims, all of whom I understand have made complaints to the statutory authorities, that I and we support them fully, that we want them to find the justice to which they are absolutely entitled? The question has been posed, can we get to the bottom of these matters? I believe the answer to that is yes. The call for abuse victims and any others, including former IRA volunteers, to come forward is genuine, and I hope that this call is heard and understood. I hope that the Government will take up the proposals as set out by Martin McGuinness to establish a mechanism to support victims and find perpetrators. I hope the statements today will amplify and underscore that call. Because for abuse to be identified and dealt with, the silence must be broken. Allegations have been made against Sinn Féin that we are party to a cover-up or conspiring to shield child abusers. This is not true, and the mere repetition of this slander will never take from the fact that it is not true. We have, like every other party, I assume, guidelines for dealing with disclosures of abuse, allegations of abuse, whether within our party or within the wider community. I can tell you in my own case, I have ongoing contact with Wellmount and Mountjoy Social Services on matters of child welfare. And the same dynamic is true of all other Sinn Féin offices and elected representatives across the country. There's rarely a week goes by that I don't have contact with victims of abuse in the course of my work. Many are victims and survivors of institutional abuse. Others have suffered in their own homes. And let me say that they, and they alone, will judge my commitment to victims and to justice, not opportunistic political or media hacks. The last number of weeks have seen the slur of cover-up of child abuse casually made, casually repeated, and reduced to a matter of common abuse. I'm the mother of 2 young children, and like any mother, I would walk the hot coals of hell to protect my children. I attach the very same value to every other child, to their safety and their welfare. And the accusation made by some in this House and amplified in some media outlets That any of us are ambivalent to the safety of children, or that we would be party to a cover-up or withhold information, is untrue. And that these slurs are made to score political advantage make them truly beneath contempt. Deputy Buttimer distances his party from the issue of abuse. Let me say to him that abuse was carried out in institutions supported, inspected and financed by the state. Abuse was denied by the state in those institutions, and redress and justice has been afforded only most grudgingly by the state. Government after government has pursued a strategy of denial, of damage limitation and half-hearted recognition and redress for victims.
Thank you.
This is the record, Alas Ceann Comhairle, of those that today accuse me and my Sinn Féin colleagues. It is the work of utter hypocrites who have chased victims through the courts of this land and beyond to protect the state, who have offered only miserly redress and who have studiously avoided conceding state liability for the vast catalogue of suffering and grief that happened on their watch. That's the truth. Some of the victims of that abuse, those that the state has failed, have muddled by. Some have coped, many have not. You'll find some of them among the rough sleepers in this city. Some have spent their lifetime in and out of prison. The inconvenient victims, the ones to be denied and obstructed by those that oversaw their abuse. No statements for them, no banner headlines for them. So much for our commitment, or your commitment, to victims. I believe these matters can be resolved, must be resolved. And if one message comes from this chamber this evening, I hope it is to every victim and to every person who has any information, any evidence, hard or soft, on matters relating to the abuse of a child. Come forward. Do not delay. Come forward now.